Yo, what's up guys? After the video of Orbia level 70 skills, of course I also got to do the other classes, and this one I'm less familiar with, so I actually asked one of my guildies to say like, okay, what do you use for Cleaf? And he gave me a few pointers, and with that I can kind of fill in what I would say whether to use or not to use. So once again, we start off with fire. First fire skill is simply a 15-second cooldown. It is a two-part skill, so there's two parts to it. Um, First part is pretty much just damage, and then the second part is going in for a mainly the heal block, as far as I know, which is kind of useful. So, and then also the airborne, which is kind of, and then some extra damage. That is the one that you normally have, but that one is not that interesting compared to what the other skill is. The other skill is a lot more interesting, I would say. 8 seconds instead of 15 seconds. And we have the chance of crit damage taken up, which is a pretty strong debuff. So let's look at that debuff, what it exactly does and how much percentage it is. So we have crit damage, crit damage down, it is crit damage taken up. Right over here, crit damage taken. So there's not too many units that do it. We have Naomi, which is relatively common, Croa, King also does it, Janos does it. But this is a nice amount of crit damage taken up. So it starts with 60 and goes all the way to 150. So if we check again, we will have one stack of that for 18 seconds. While on max you will have 20 seconds on that. And then also it's just 8-second cooldown. So if you kind of spam this, you can easily get like 2.5 stacks with that. If you are, for example, in raid, you can easily with like just 4 or 5 cleaves, you're pretty much good to go for 100 stack on this. Like you need like 3 cleaves and then maybe a king and a Naomi and you're kind of good to go. So that is very strong. Also, you have the silence over here. So this skill definitely is a take. 100% this is a skill you do want to use. Mainly in PvE you want to use this. I don't think Cleaf Fire is used as much in PvP as well. And even if you use it in PvP, I think the silence is still more useful because you can do this skill 3 and then you have the skill 2 with the silence, which is not that bad. But I feel like the other skill is not that useful. Actually, guilty of mine, he said that he only used this skill to do some heal blocks against specific units in Galagos. Besides that, he pretty much just used the fire one. So fire one is definitely one that you want to take and definitely one that you want to use. And also probably the one that the moment that you hit level 70, you no longer want to be using the wind, which used to be the main thing that PvE Cleave was using mainly for the electric shock. It was this one you want with the electric shock? No, S2 is the one with the electric shock. So for the electric shock, the old S2, you don't want to use that anymore. You want to use this one and you start using this one for sure. So then on to the next skill. We have the water skill. And water skill is, I guess, one of the most broken ones for the new ones out there. So we have the old skill that is just damage on first. And then the second one is act down and then airborne. Which doesn't do all too much, 10-second cooldown. We changed that into a 25-second cooldown, so that is pretty long. Does it actually go down in cooldown? It doesn't. But you have the energy of water kind of stuff. And that means that if the target has attack down, you freeze them. When attacked, you freeze them. This is pretty much god tier in PvP. This is insanely good in PvP. This pretty much means what I've seen recently. Every cleave is no longer aiming to run light or dark as much. Every cleave in Brawl is just aiming to run that water. Even on defense, well, on defense you still see pretty a lot of light and dark. I think light and dark are still better for defense for Cleave though. But for offense Cleave, I think this is very strong because you just stand next to a bunch of units and you start stunning them for left, right, and center. And this is a good amount of stun. Like sure, it is pretty lengthy on the cooldown, but it is very good. So definitely for this one, I think the moment that you have this, you're always going to take frozen armor. You're not going to use water into PvE anyways. I would say if you used in PvE, maybe like the hero area for water, you might want to switch it out for a damage skill because this is not that useful for PvE and like hero area. But for Galagos, once again, for Galagos, you can stun like whole teams with this as well. So this is still pretty nice for Galagos PvE. So yeah, for water, once again, definitely something you do want to take. Then we have the last one already, which is wind. And wind has the S2 once again. So the normal wind S2 is a 15-second cooldown. And that does the electric shock. So that is used to be the strong PvE skill. But now since you have the fire cleave, you will definitely go for the fire cleave for the PvE skill. So you don't really need this for PvE anymore. And then afterwards, you have some damage dealt up for if there's creatures and airborne. We can switch that into a 15-second cooldown, okay. And then we have a 2-hit thing that throws the axe and then, or not axe, pole arm thing, mace, whatever it's called. What do they actually say? Blunt weapon. Okay, I guess so, it's a mace or something like that. But then, yeah, first hit is attack-based. That's kind of weird. Like, why does Cleaf suddenly get, like, attack-based stuff? Like, there's a few more skills that have, like, half attack, half defense. That's just... Why the attack? Just do damage from defense. But yeah, whatever. But this actually does a good amount of damage. From what I've heard from Cleaf, this is probably the highest damage output skill that you have on Cleaf. Sure, you still want to stay in fire because of fire. You actually have like a team buffing thing. But if you need Cleaf to do a lot of damage by itself, Wind is a very good option. And I've actually seen a bunch of Cleaves also at some point switch from water to wind because wind just starts doing a lot of damage. And wind is also good for keeping the shield up, so this is, in all honesty, pretty strong skill, and it does quite a lot of damage. And also my guildie mentions, like, this is probably your highest cleave, that, like, besides your ult, of course, this is the highest damage cleave skill you probably will have, including, like, all elements. So definitely one that you do want to use as well. Previous one does have some depth penetration of 50%, which could be niche here and there, but you probably don't really want to use this anymore. However, he also mentions in Seal, you still want to use this, because Seal, in Seal you can go for this one, the new skill, but that doesn't really help. You still need to bring the debuffs, or not the debuffs, the dots, and this is probably your best dot that a Cleave can provide. Yeet! Actually, it looks pretty cool if you do it like this. Never noticed it. Actually, for some reason, with the suit of One Punch Man, this actually just makes so much more sense to be like, yeet, 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 yeet. Okay, I'm hella wasting your time. But it is actually kind of funny to look at it like that. Okay, so yeah, once again, quickly going over the skills. This one pretty much always will use the new skill. For water, pretty much always will use the new skill as well, except for hero area, I would say that you maybe want to use the old one still. But even if you dare stun like the units, it's not that bad, because you take less damage. But you really need to stun them, you just need to kill them, so... But that's just the second area, hero area, so this is very neat. And then this one is, you definitely want to use the new skill, except for Seal. For Seal, you want to use the old skill. So that is pretty much it to it for Cleave, I would say. Pretty straightforward. Actually, a lot more than Orbia, where you all want to use the new skill rather than the old skill. With Orbia, we actually had, like... I would say that I used one on a niche specific thing. Just Brawl. And for this one, on a Brawl and PvE on the Wind one. For Orbia, but here it's pretty much all of the new ones are good. So next video will be Kina. I am least familiar with Kina, so I'll ask a bunch of guys for that one as well. So guys, hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't yet, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Still trying to grow this channel, and see you in the next one.